here we've got Rick Anderson with the UC Components, and this is going to be a great interview. Looking forward to this. And so, hope you're doing good, Rick, today, and everything's well with you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Excited to record an interview here for the
There,
first time.
perfect. All right. So let's get this going here. So basically, one of the first questions I had, your dad started the business, and this was back in what, 1972?
1974 is the actual dated beginning of the company. I believe
Okay.
conceptually he was thinking about it probably about as early as 1972.
Got it. Okay. And so, like, I know you were a lot younger back then, and so what was it like when your dad started the business? What do you
It was,
remember?
yeah,
Stories.
he was. I mean, from what I do remember, it was, it was very much kind of in addition to his regular job, he started making vented screws as a moonlighting project. And so when I remember the very early days, it was him with a drill press and doing that in the garage at the house in Union City.
Now, did he come up with the idea for the? I mean, where did he come up with the idea for the vented screw? I mean, did he come up with it, or was this something he saw, or something he thought up, or?
It wasn't his idea. This was a concept that had been used in vacuum equipment and for other applications before. In fact, something we did a patent search on, and a piece of advice that his friends in the industry gave him was not to worry about trying to patent it, just figure out how to do it and do it better than everybody else. But basically, he was working for equipment makers back in the late 60s, early 70s, and he was a draftsman by trade. And these call outs for vented screws were coming through on prints that he was working on for these build outs. And there was no commercial source available for these screws. So these were heading over to the in-house machining department. And he would always get complaints about that because it's pretty tedious work.
So basically, he started the business. What, essentially in your garage, right?
Correct. Yeah, he did it. Started it in the garage and got permission, written permission from his employer at the time to be able to sell those vented screws back to them. Um, and then that expanded into a couple of other outfits and grew from there.
And then he decided that he was going to open up the first shop back in Union City, right? That's kind of where the whole the when the actual company started solidified and started, right?
Correct. Yeah, he really was working on it out of the garage. He went and bought himself a Sears Craftsman drill press, which is what he started on with a credit card, and started tinkering around with that. Pretty much after he knew that this was something he thought he could do, he started coming up with part numbering schemes and actually designing a little catalog.
At what point did he move out of the garage and into the first shop in Union City?
And so this is also a little fuzzy. And in fact, where that first shop was, I may not recall. He was afforded some space by a couple of different friends of his in the industry, in particular a fellow by the name of Dick Hagan, who was instrumental in the beginning of the company, somebody that encouraged my dad to go do his own thing. And he had shop space and rented my dad out a small corner of that area. But at some point, my dad needed more space than that. And those are some of my first memories of moving boxes of screws around. And I believe, though I could be wrong here, is that it was from Dick Hagan's location to an office that my dad, or a light industrial office that my dad actually did rent across the bay in Mountain View.
Got it. Okay.
So that was actually our first departure from Union City over to Mountain View.
So the UC comes from Union City, is that correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And then and that was basically because that was his first shop, his first corner of a place or whatever, and so he
Right.
took that name. And so, what were some of the challenges at that time that uh, that you heard about, or that you obviously maybe not remember, but some of the things that you heard about were the challenges during during, let's call it the 70s period of the business?
Sure. Yeah, I know one of the premier challenges, or the one that really brought my dad into this business and pushed him to make it a full-time operation, was the recession of the 1970s that a lot of folks do remember. There was big unemployment, high inflation, and we didn't have a lot of money as a family. And so money was an issue for my dad, and job security was an issue. And he ended up being laid off twice during that period of time. He started the business after he was laid off the first time, and that led him to sort of moonlight this project. And after he was laid off that second time, he said, forget it, I'm going to try to do this on my own, and at least I can sort of control my own destiny. And so I would say early on, probably big challenge was money, and then finding suppliers that would sell to him. And so this wasn't easy. And then basic business advice from other friends who had, because this was my dad's first attempt at running his own show, and he really didn't know anything about that side of the business side of the business. He knew he could make something.
Right. And now in terms of, I mean, you brought up an interesting point in terms of sourcing, product and that kind of a thing. I mean, and what were some of his criteria at that time for sourcing product? I mean, sourcing product back then was a lot different than, I mean, today you've got more of a global opportunity, whereas back then
Absolutely. Absolutely. At that time, there was still a lot more American manufacturing of fasteners. Really, we kind of started to see the beginning of a lot of imports during that period of time, primarily out of Taiwan back then. So quality was an issue, but that also ended up being sort of an asset, I would say. And I say that because some of the same things that were challenges there were also sort of turned around by some of the friends that he had and the support he got through the industry. He got to meet through some of his peers and associates at Varian Associates and other companies he had worked at. These fellows made key introductions to him. One of the first of which was to a company called the Olander Company in Sunnyvale, and that introduction led to additional introductions with domestic manufacturers like Larry McBride of Ideal Fasteners. But yeah, we had some really good people that turned him in the right direction and offered him some credit at a time when it was difficult for him to get credit.
So basically, we're talking the early 70s, the mid 70s, the early 80s. And what did your dad do to get new customers?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, really it kind of started where he was working at the time, where they were designing equipment. And then as things started to get legs under them in 1974, 75, 76, he produced these small calendars and really part numbered everything, which was sort of a stroke of genius that we can maybe discuss a bit more later. But one of his good friends who had worked at Varian Associates also had started his own business, Ralph Dunaway of Dunaway Stockroom. And Ralph he was out doing trade shows and making sales calls and things my dad just didn't have the time or resources to do. And Ralph would take my dad's small catalogs to trade shows and put them out on his table and tell people about the product. And really it was word of mouth and a few key friends through the industry that really pushed the company from a couple of OEMs to the beginning of semiconductor and end users, people like Intel, for instance, or AMD.
Got it. And that was, of course, the infancy of the, the big Silicon Valley semiconductor boom going on.
Correct. Yeah, really the time when the company started, we were talking about vacuum applications primarily for defense, the DEW system, early warning radar, and vacuum tubes, and that migrating to space flight applications, and then into semiconductor manufacture. And then that, obviously, that was something my dad really didn't see coming, that exploded.
Let's go over to you. So you started working in the business, I think you said when you were 14.
Yes, I had done some little things. I have memories of doing little odd jobs, being pulled out of school once. It's probably when I was in about third grade or so, to move some screws from one location to another. But then we moved to the South Bay in 1976. I was still quite young then, but yeah, started working when I was 13, 14 years old, drilling screws, either in the garage where we had another drill press, or actually at my dad's shop, and just doing it kind of on the weekends for a nickel a screw.
Nice.
And yeah, that went on for a while, but I got pretty proficient. And then when, at the point at which you can produce 500 screws in an hour and you're 14 years old, and in the early 80s making $25 an hour, I had to go on the payroll. And, saw a wage cut.
See, that's what you get for efficiency,
That's right. Yes.
So you went off to college and you decided that you were going to study marketing in college. And what was so interesting? What interested you about marketing and advertising so much?
Well, I'd say I didn't start out that way. Really, what I started out in was finance. My idea was to go be a finance major, and that would be something that, an area where I could contribute to the company if things went that direction. And if not, who knows where they'd lead. But as it turned out, numbers weren't really so much for me. And I had a couple of journalism classes along the way, and I found myself migrating in that direction, being a better writer maybe than I was a numbers person, and then drifted over into a major that was as close as I could get to business without all the math, really. And so advertising lent itself well. I met a number of friends through those classes. I had some really good instructors, and San Jose State University had quite a exceptional advertising program.
And so what is it that you really like about, advertising? I mean, you studied it, and so I'm making some bold assumptions here that it was something also that was pretty interesting to you.
I did. I think I found it attractive. Some of the guys that I studied under that were in advertising, gentlemen who came up with the Got Milk campaign, among others, and to see the power of words, and especially very concise, constructions of sentences and terms, and the impact they could have. And I felt that my strength throughout school had been explaining things, writing. So I saw myself, if I had gone that direction, as basically a copywriter in the advertising industry, as opposed to, say, more on the creative side. I kind of saw myself as the person who would put the words to the thoughts. And then I also saw a direct ability to apply that to what I was doing.
Mm-hmm. So basically your intention, it sounds like your intention pretty much when you got out of college was to go back and work in the family business, right?
Yeah, and really we were a lower middle class family, and I originally had desires of going away to college somewhere. I had Ivy League fantasies and whatnot, but the reality was my family couldn't afford that. And so throughout college, I stayed local, lived at home for a couple of years, and worked at the company while I was going to college. And throughout that period, I met my future business partner, brought a lot of my friends through the university into the company to work in part-time capacities, and really kind of grew to a point where I felt like this was something I wanted to do for a career. I felt like it was, I had some passion for it, and it was a realistic avenue for me.
Got it. So what was it that really, you said you had a passion for it, and what was it that really interested you in the business?
Well, I think seeing part of it was my dad's devotion to it. That's hard not to make an impression on you when he, has a recliner and will sleep in the chair to fill orders, and and things of this nature, controlling his own destiny. I think I really liked working with friends and other folks at the company. And my dad was really good at focusing on small victories.
Mm.
And so we kept an order pad in the office, for instance. And like every time we got a phone order, we went and wrote down the total for that order on the pad. So everybody in that office every day knew exactly where we were at. And we all participated in that. It was a very visceral connection to the growth of a company. And so I think he really got buy-in from everyone, including myself, into that idea that this is growing, we're doing good things, and let's see that progress as we go. And that is very, it makes everybody feel like they can make a difference.
And so that, of course, kind of set up the company culture over there of, that at least that you guys have in terms of inclusivity and really being fairly transparent overall with the, with the growth of the company, the success, et cetera, right?
Absolutely. I'd say, especially internally, we're very transparent. And I think even externally, we really don't try to hide a lot of who we are or where we're going or what our intentions are. So yeah, I think so. We still keep that same pad in the front office today.
Mm-hmm.
It gets filled up a lot quicker, but we still have a lot of those same cultural things hard baked into the company today that were there from day one with my dad.
Nice. And so what are some of the key factors that you feel have contributed to the success of the company over the years?
Well, one of the, as I alluded to earlier, I think, well, people, I'm going to say primarily is the biggest reason for our success. And initially, my dad and his peers and friends and how they guided him through the beginning of the company, the people that he added along the way that helped mentor me, and then and right on down the line, all the way to the people that my business partner and I have hired subsequently. The people really make the whole thing work. We've got a lot of very long-term employees, and we treat them well. We offer a good package here. We retain people, and I think that's a big factor. I'm going to cite that as the big factor to our success internally. And what I'll give a nod to externally was, as I mentioned earlier, my dad created this catalog very early on in the business and part numbered everything, sort of commoditized the product, even though he wouldn't like me using that term because we're an engineered product, but part numbering everything and being a designer, the idea that you want your part numbers on those prints for original equipment. And so that was a very big deal to him. And we really made that happen early on. He made that happen early on and really embedded that in the culture and the early growth of Silicon Valley through the OEMs and then therefore on to the end users. What he didn't foresee coming was a number of years later within the semiconductor industry, after a couple of cycles, and you see the large OEMs like Applied Materials, KLA, et cetera, subcontract a lot of their manufacturing and bring in a concept called copy exact. And what copy exact stated was that you will follow our bill of materials precisely and use all the same vendors that we use. And that is how we will maintain quality assembly, even through subcontracting.
Mm-hmm.
So what that did was at a time when we may have had a few infant competitors start to pop up and had some disputes with a few OEMs that are out there that shall remain unnamed. We found ourselves on all of these prints disseminated throughout Silicon Valley and around the world by the OEMs and this directive for everyone to use those suppliers. So we went from maybe 20 customers of significant size to 50 to 70 to 150 because of this dissemination of bills of materials and the copy exact policies that semiconductor companies were enforcing.
Well, in certain ways that of course makes a lot of sense because, if once you've got the product exactly the way you want it, then, there's, and you've got supply chains all over the world. I mean, the last thing you want to do is, as we've all seen, anybody who's been in business knows, if you try to cut a corner, or maybe you never know what you're going to get. You might get the same product. On the other hand, you might not. So
Yeah.
it definitely keeps the quality standard way up.
Yeah. And also maybe something I'd revisit for a moment is when talking about people, these weren't just the people inside the company, but the people outside the company as well. The people that carried the word for us, like the Ralph Dunaways out there, that did a lot to make UC Components what it was and spread the word through the American Vacuum Society, Materials Research Society, and other societies out there where engineers come together.
Got
And
it.
so it was, in addition, it was our early partners and customers that helped in that as well.
And that brings up an interesting point, because you guys are active in a lot of the different vacuum societies and whatnot that are out there, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. Whether it's vacuum equipment, AVEM, AVS, MRS, SPIE, SEMI, a number of different vacuum related societies. And we're always looking for more to be part of. We've dabbled in medical and space flight and food processing as well. And so I see that trend continuing in the future as we go forward.
You guys are pretty environmentally conscious over there. And I mean, how did that come about? I mean, I know you've got solar panels all over the roof, and
Mhm.
you take that pretty seriously. And what are some of the other things that you guys have done over there to fit within the environmental space?
Yeah. One of these things actually goes back again to my father, and many years ago, a decision he made, because cleaning has always been a big part of our product here from day one, really, as my father came from that industry. So he understood the demands of the industry, as opposed to, say, a standard fastener distributor that might be out there. He made a decision long ago to make our cleaning process an aqueous-based cleaning process. So by being a water-based process, we're not dealing with a lot of nasty chemicals, and therefore disposal is less of an issue. We do a lot of recycling of stainless steel, of other materials. We use recycled materials in our packaging products, namely our outer boxes. And then we've done other things like LED lighting and various improvements around the facility to reduce our carbon footprint
Mhm.
and become more energy efficient. And we're always moving in that direction and try to adhere and participate in as many industry standards that are out there as we can.
And so a couple of things. I mean, obviously the cleaning process that gets us into the ready vac process. But before we go there, when did you guys, and what brought up how did you guys see the need? I'm assuming that in the beginning you guys weren't doing we weren't producing things in clean rooms, right?
Correct.
So when did the clean room come in, and which I'm assuming also kind of dovetails into the ready vac process?
To some degree, actually, the clean rooms came before ReadyVac came along. ReadyVac is really kind of an advertising thing that came along later to sort of describe all these processes that we were already performing. And so the cleaning process really started basically when we moved to Mountain View. Well, my dad had always cleaned product, but it was very much like a saucepan and some water and nitric acid. That was back in these slightly less friendly days in the very beginning. And then we moved to more of an alkaline detergent water-based solution. And prior to clean rooms, we used laminar flow hoods. So it originally started out that the cleaning was done inside of a laminar flow hood. And then that moved to the areas where we were counting screws being under laminar flow hoods. And that eventually evolved into a clean room. And that really came about when we leased our first large property over on Logue Avenue back in the late 80s, early 90s. But we were actively cleaning well before that. But like with all other industries, the clean room era had begun, and there was reform taking place in that area, and we grew right along with that.
In some ways, it made sense because since a lot of your customers had clean rooms, and since a lot of your customers were doing their manufacturing in clean rooms or their processes in clean rooms, then it kind of makes sense that you guys go along with that same, the same basic manufacturing.
Yeah, a lot of the larger assemblies and pieces of hardware for these vacuum systems were being cleaned either by the equipment maker assembling them or the outfit who made the original piece for them. No one was really doing that for fasteners. And so he knew that that would separate him from anybody else out there, is that if he supplied a product that was ready to use, that was much more apt to be accepted in the industry, that it was one less thing that the customer had to do to make that product vacuum ready.
So basically that was the infancy of what is today known as the ReadyVac process.
Correct. Yeah, and the ReadyVac that's an idea that I will take credit for. That was one that I did think of. That wasn't pop for a change, but yeah, and it was basically, I had been doing quite a bit of various small advertising and whatnot, using taglines on things, developing trade show materials and whatnot, and just trying to find a term that would capture that idea that our product is ready for vacuum. And then going through the search of names that would be suitable, finding a spelling that we could use, and then going through the formal copywriting process, and then following that up with registering that trademark, which is where we stand today. So yeah, trying to describe in the simplest way possible that these screws are ready for vacuum now.
And of course, ready for vacuum now means that they leave your clean room completely packaged in the clean room. And so they can go from one clean room to the other clean room without having to have any secondary operations or recleaning or any of that.
And really the process even starts from the very beginning, where when we receive raw screws, as we call them, in the back door, there are oftentimes machining oils and whatnot on those fasteners. And as people in the semiconductor industry know, hydrocarbons are probably the greatest sin. And so these need to be removed. And so that was what kind of led the charge down that direction. And the ReadyVac process now is considerably more elaborate than it was in the early days, where now there can even be pre-cleaning for particularly dirty parts. Anything that goes out for any sort of coating or plating that might be subcontracted gets pre-cleaned here first, and then leaves and is generally cleaned again during those processes, brought back in-house, cleaned again here, and then fully packaged within an ISO class 5 clean room. And all that cleaning and all that packaging is done within that clean room. So yes, when the product comes out of that class 5 clean room, it is in its final packaging form and just needs to be confirmed and then packaged for final shipment.
So between the expansion of the fastener line and also the bringing in of different coatings and finishes, I mean, how has that all played into,
When we started, it was just the vented screw. My dad had no intention of doing anything other than that. And it's funny how you kind of set your expectations somewhere, and then hopefully they get exceeded later. But for instance, our part numbering system is alphanumeric and somewhat phonetic. The problem with that is that only works for a while. And when you get into tens of thousands of part numbers, it gets difficult to continue along that path. For instance, we originally, the first coated part we ever provided was a molybdenum disulfide coating. And our suffix on the end of our part number for that was -C. Why -C? Well, C means coated. And surely we'll only ever offer one coated product. Well, not really. We offer at least 3, 2 that you'll find on the website, and then at least 1 or 2 others that we do kind of on a special order basis. But yeah, it was pretty much all stainless steel in the beginning, and that sort of evolved into, went from inch product to metric product to various head types, and then the introduction of coating and plating, and then from there into different materials, really. So it was really an evolution, and my dad for many years avoided anything that wasn't vented. But as it turned out, for every vented silver plated screw there's probably a need for 4 non-vented silver plated screws. So that part of the business just kind of grew legs and took off right alongside the vented products.
And then there's also 2 different types of venting, right? I could be wrong. Maybe there's more than 2, but there's basically center venting and slot venting, right?
Sure, absolutely. And one offers slightly better strength numbers than the other. One offers slightly better venting along the threads, but has the potential for cross threading. So they both have their positives and negatives, but those are the 2 primary ways. There are a number of other designs out there that you may see around the world from some other manufacturers that are out there. Some can be pretty elaborate for good reason, maybe, maybe not. So we try to be sensitive to cost-effective methods, shall we say.
Got it.
So I think we tend to be very cost competitive with a high quality product.
And then, and of course you guys also, you guys have a ton of different kinds of materials. I mean, you get into plastics, ceramics, and exotic materials, and pretty much run the gamut, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, from mild steel product to titanium and some high value product. So yeah, there's quite a bit of that out there. A lot of it specific application dependent, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we've taken that on as we've moved forward and offer quite a few different material types. Probably the primary ones of which would be just the lower magnetic permeability versions of stainless steel, like A4 on the metric side and 316 on the inch side, from a terminology standpoint. But yeah, we offer a lot of different material choices.
And then when did you guys decide to bring O-rings into the mix?
The O-rings were kind of floating around even way back there in the sort of mid to late 80s, I would say, possibly even before that. My dad did know that there was a need for vacuum baking of O-rings to drive out water vapor, which is the biggest contaminant in vacuum situations, generally speaking, and really slows processes down. So simply by baking an O-ring before you install it, you can speed your pump down process, not to mention reduce contamination. So it was an idea he played with for a long time, but we really didn't add any baking equipment until the early 90s. And even then, it was very slow to get off the ground. We had just a handful of customers that really were convinced of the need. Have quite a few customers out there that were doing it internally already, and we're happy with that. So that has been the development process for the O-ring business, has been a slower and longer term one, but it's something that's become an integral part of who we are now.
And you guys offer O-rings in a number of different materials, and also everything from a tiny little thing all the way up to like 6 feet or bigger in diameter.
Yeah, much like with our screws, all the way from aught 80s or tiny little 1.6 millimeter diameter all the way up to 3/4 inch diameter. The O-rings are the same way. We offer very small diameters up to very large chamber door O-rings, which oftentimes carry a lot of water in them because they're a very large seal. And baking something like that out can really make a big difference on a big chamber. And so, yeah, we carry a lot of different material types too, although we primarily bake Viton, which is the most common used and most cost-effective O-ring for most vacuum applications. And so we kind of, you might say, put lipstick on a pig a little bit. We take what can be an inferior product, generally designed for automotive or other uses, and refine it further in small volume for a very specific industry. And so we take a pretty cheap and rudimentary product, and for a quite affordable price, we make it a much more higher performing product.
And so you guys, I mean, it sounds to me like from the beginning or from pretty early on, you guys, you know, or especially after the copy exact situation, that kind of set you took you from being essentially a US company and to having customers around the globe, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We that really expanded our footprint significantly, and really kind of it was almost free advertising, right? It carried our name around the world, and also through this network of friends and peers and friendly customers, including Ralph Dunaway and Dunaway Stockroom, who I've mentioned before. Um, this expanded, and in fact, Ralph made introductions to our two biggest European distributors that we still have today, initially in Switzerland and then later in Germany. But
Mhm.
yeah, Ralph was a titan in the industry and really made a huge difference for UC Components, and is a big reason why we're here today.
And then when did you guys start to more actively expand your global footprint after, I mean, you initially had Switzerland and Germany, and then, what's been kind of like the evolution of the expansion?
Yeah, so I'd say after those two were added, we started to see upticks in business from other places as well, right? We started to receive orders, especially in the UK, and then eventually landed with somebody there, um, and that was a great addition. And that we're talking probably like the late '80s, again, early '90s. We start to push in this direction, and then as we began to market in a more, I would say, structured way. Um, Brought on some professional help. Then we kind of, I'd say, that's when the real push to go more international, look at international publications, international organizations, international trade shows, and start to push out in those directions, translating documents into other languages, offering Google translation on the website, things of this nature, um, really started to make a big difference, and resulted in distribution partners in the aforementioned Switzerland, Germany, the UK, Italy, Japan, Australia, Korea, and in Singapore. So we've had um, a very nice growth in the international market that continues to expand.
Let's talk a little bit about your company philosophy. I mean, you've got a business partner, and unlike, I mean, you guys walk the walk and talk the talk when you talk about your people that are your most important asset, et cetera. Um, and so a little bit more about what is the company philosophy? How do you and Jeff kind of work together and with the rest of your team, et cetera?
Yeah, and so a little bit about my business partner Jeff is we met, but while both in university at San Jose State, and he was the only other kid I knew that worked his entire summers. Most of the other kids went home and kind of played around during the summer, and not to say that I didn't to a degree, because I certainly did, but I also worked full time throughout the summer, and offered him a job, and he took to my parents, my family well, and was a good fit, personality wise with me, and kind of took on more of the operational side of the business, the numbers side a little bit more than what I was comfortable with. And so he kind of was there while my dad was still here. And he was also mentored, as a number of the people that are still here were, by my father. And then after my father's passing, underneath my mother for a while, during which period of time Jeff and I kind of ran the company. And then after my mother's passing, he bought in and we took over. But essentially, sort of the short philosophy is don't screw it up. And that really, I mean, a bit of a silly pun there, but the truth of the matter is, my dad did the hard work and put in those ruthless hours for little or no pay, to set the foundation. And we had made contributions also over a period of time, but basically at that point, we knew we were heading in a good direction. And as long as we could kind of keep ourselves on that path, we knew we had something special. And then, and obviously then sort of the culture became more about Jeff and I and continuing that path forward. We also have a quality policy and whatnot that's a bit more formal and essentially says some of the same things, basically that we are continuing the basis that the founder put forward for this company, and that we intend to provide high quality products to our customers and with the intent of meeting or exceeding their expectations. And so I think we continue to do that today. And we try to make it a nice environment to work in. We do very much have a family environment. We have a lot of multi-generation families working here. We take care of our employees. And really, I think, I guess to put something in more of a less formal nutshell, it would be that, like, you know, let's do something special here and make life a little bit better for everybody that works for us and our customers too. And, you know, it's a good place to come to work every day.
Sounds like it. And so, you know, what do you, you know, here you are, you work, you know, you're working in the business all the time, and you're, you know, taking care of everybody and whatnot. And then, you know, what do you like to do in your spare time? Let's talk
I like
about
to golf.
Yeah.
I like to golf. Yeah, when I get a chance, I like to go hit some balls, and fortunately, so does my business partner and a few of the other guys that work here. So that's a nice ability there to get outside of the office and still talk shop and have a great time. And so that and family, of course, I've got a family of my own and like to travel internationally and domestically, and you know, hang out with good friends and associates, and maybe have a nice glass of wine now and again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, that's all, you know, that's all good stuff. And that's good that you're not completely obsessed with only screws and O-rings, you know.
No. Yeah. Yeah, man. You can't be a Renaissance man just doing screws all day.
No.
So that's what we aspire to here. So yeah, definitely like to have a little bit of fun outside the office, and really a little bit of fun inside the office too.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the you know, you guys have a pretty casual work environment over there, and everybody seems to get along really well.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, to me, it just seems to be a very solution oriented kind of environment where
Yeah, we're really out there to, you know, to help our customers and to you know, hopefully be a part of their day that's easy, and that they enjoy. I think a lot of our customers enjoy our salespeople. They're very personable, and I think their environment is reflected in how they treat the customers and the rapport they have with their customers.
you know, is there anything else that you'd like to add that we maybe didn't touch upon that, you know, you'd like people to know?
Well, I would say that, you know, you don't get this far as we've gotten without good people, and that includes all of our vendors as well. The marketing support we have that keeps pushing us to new levels, and you know, great team and good energy makes good things happen.
All right, awesome. Well, Rick, it's been a pleasure to talk to you and to you know, interview you, and look forward to a lot more in the future.
Sounds great, Rico.
All right,
Until next time.
you got it. Take care.
You too.